Hi, I'm Yube, and welcome to the Absolute Beginner's Diablo 3 guide. Tons of people pick this game up every day, and a lot of them seem to have the same questions and the same concerns, and it's easy to see as a long-term player where Blizzard have done a really bad job addressing them. There are a lot of guides out there for players who've hit the level cap and are wondering what comes next, or returning players who already have a good handle on the basics, but this video is aimed at people who are completely new to the game. Maybe you've played for a couple of days, or an afternoon, or not even at all. This one's for you guys. So we're going to start with the big one, the biggest question all new players have when they first start an RPG. What class should I pick? Well, while some classes are slightly easier to level than others, they're all very accessible for new players, more so than in most games, because all of the classes generally fill quite similar roles. All of the classes are capable of putting out crazy damage, and you don't have to worry about accidentally picking the healing class, because there isn't one. There are lots of different builds for each class once you hit max level, but that's a choice you can make much further down the line. For now, take a look at each of the classes' descriptions and just pick one that looks fun. Progression in Diablo 3 is shared between characters. Let's say you create a barbarian and you get him to level 30 before deciding that, hang on, I'm bored of leaping around, carving through enemies in a typhoon of steel and fury. What I really want to be is a nimble spellcaster, always just out of my enemy's reach while pelting them with meteors and rings of fire. When you create your new level 1 wizard, it'll have access to any gold and materials you found on your barbarian. The exception to this is that characters on different game modes can't share that progression with each other. So what are those different game modes? Well, when you create a character, you're given these two checkboxes down here, Hardcore and Seasonal. Hardcore is, as the name suggests, for more experienced players. Effectively, it means that if a character dies, they're gone for good. To keep the game fresh for long-term players, Blizzard implemented the Seasons feature. What that means is that players are given the chance to start over every few months, without access to any of their existing characters or progression, and with special seasonal achievements and rewards to earn. At the end of the season, all your seasonal characters are reverted to non-seasonal ones, and any progress you've made on them contributes to your non-seasonal progress. That means that if this is your first character, it might as well be a seasonal one, though the choice is entirely up to you. There are two game types in Diablo 3, Story or Campaign, and Adventure mode. When you're starting out, you'll only have the Campaign mode unlocked. Once you've beaten the final boss, Adventure mode will unlock. You'll be spending the vast majority of your time in Adventure mode once you unlock it. It's a faster paced game type based on dungeon running. For now, I have to recommend taking your time with the story mode. The storytelling is only okay, it is mostly told through violence, but the story itself is pretty good, and it serves as a great introduction to the game. But now, I'm going to log into one of my existing characters, and we'll go through some gameplay stuff. So, you're an hour in, you've made it to the cathedral, carving your way through the undead to find the fallen star, and you're doing pretty well. In fact, it seems you barely have to touch an enemy, and it just melts away. Are you the greatest Diablo 3 player in the world? Definitely. But, well, just to be sure, let's check the difficulty settings. Maybe the game stuck us on the easiest one by default? Well, nope, looks like we're on normal. This game must just be really easy. Well, it's not. There are 17 difficulty levels in Diablo 3, and the easiest is called Normal. Which is stupid. It's a holdover from the pre-expansion days, and it just never got changed. If you are finding the game too easy, you can hit the Leave Game button. This will take you out of the current game you're in and allow you to change the difficulty. You can select which difficulty you'd like from the menu, which will be coming up in a second if my hard drive decides to actually load the damn thing. There we go. We can go to Game Settings and select the difficulty. The hard difficulty, as you can see here, offers a lot of extra experience and a lot of extra gold at the cost of making monsters a lot tougher. I wouldn't pay attention to these recommendations, by the way, they're also a little bit out of date. Most players choose to level on hard, but if you're feeling brave, you can always turn it up further to expert, which isn't that different from hard, or master, which is. The higher difficulty levels are just degrees of torment, which we don't really need to worry about now, but as you can see, they offer huge bonuses to high-level characters who are able to deal with them. As you level, you're given access to a ton of different skills, and each skill has several different runes which you can select to modify it. For example, I'm looking at the Locust Swarm skill right now, and I'm currently using the Cloud of Insects rune, which means that anything affected by Locust Swarm deals 25% reduced damage. There's also runes like Pestilence, which allows Locust Swarm to spread more efficiently, Devouring Swarm, which gives me mana back, Disease Swarm, which gives an AoE after after an enemy is killed by Locust Swarm, and Searing Locust, which just deals more damage. All of these runes modify the skill in different ways. You have a lot of skills, and you have a lot of runes, and it's worth taking a look through your skill screen just every couple of levels to see what's new. Remember that the level you gain the skill at, or the rune at, doesn't have any bearing on how good that skill or rune is. A rune you get at level 20 isn't necessarily going to be any worse than one you get at level 50. They're just different ways of modifying what the skill does, so play around with them while leveling, and find ones you like. While we're on the subject of skills, I'm going to point you to the most important part of the game that Blizzard forgot to tell you exists. There's a tiny option, just a checkbox, which is incredibly important and has a name so vague it's almost meaningless. We go into the options menu, and then go into gameplay, and make sure that elective mode here is enabled. As you can see, it enables full customization of skill selection and placement on the action bar. That's real important! With elective mode enabled, you can freely choose any array of skills you like to go into your 6 skill slots, rather than being constrained to exactly one skill from each school. You can have 4 primary and 2 secondary skills if you like, rather than being limited to one of each. You can see here that I've got 2 defensive skills. If I didn't have elective mode enabled, I wouldn't be able to have that. The only downside to elective mode is that it can make it less obvious when you gain new skills and runes while leveling. With that in mind, it's best to go into your skills menu every couple of levels and just flick through every skill to make sure you know if you've got something new. While you're leveling, you're going to routinely find lots of new weapons and pieces of armour. Most of it will be pretty useless, especially at high levels, but how will you know which is better? Let's go into our stats screen and see if we can make sense of it. There are a ton of numbers on this screen. Some of them are useful, some of them are not. This right here is the most important thing you'll see while leveling. 2115.9 weapon damage per second. Your weapon damage per second is really important. You've probably noticed that your skills will tell you how much damage they do in terms of a percentage of your weapon damage. For example, my Haunt skill deals 4000% weapon damage over 12 seconds. That means that no matter what your class is, all of your damage is proportional to your weapon's damage. Two-handed weapons are generally slower but more powerful. If you're using 2 one-handed weapons, your character simply alternates between the 2 with each strike. These 3 numbers here are the big traps. They're intended to give you an idea of how powerful you are at a glance. This number is a rough indicator of your damage per second, this number is a rough indicator of how much damage you can survive, and this number is a rough indicator of how good you are at healing yourself. Unfortunately, they're extremely unreliable, especially at high levels, and in fact they fail to take into account pretty much everything that isn't immediately calculable and some things that are. Each of the attributes on a piece of armour has a little diamond next to it. Let's see if we can find one. There we go. If the diamond is orange, as you can see here with monster kills grant extra experience, its effect isn't taken into account by your sheet stats. Let's see if we can find something that's a little bit more interesting. Yes, here, you can see on the secondary equipment here, I've got extra thorns damage, which means that monsters will take damage from hitting me. That isn't taken into account in any of these stats, and there are some very interesting ones and very important ones like area damage, which also isn't. Area damage is one of the most important damage stats in the game for basically everyone, and it's not taken into account here. Instead of looking at these numbers too much, while leveling, you should be looking for just the basics. Weapon damage is the most important thing, followed by your main stat, intelligence, dexterity, or strength, depending on your class, and then vitality, which gives you more health. Beyond those 3, you probably want to look for critical hit chance and life on hit. Anything else is pretty much a bonus. Each piece of gear you find will have at least a couple of different stat upgrades on it, and each one is different. The good news is that you'll be finding an absolute ton of it. As just a quick aside on the huge subject of gear, I want to draw your attention to something else that looks confusing but just doesn't have to be. Elemental damage. When you get a weapon drop like this one, which I definitely didn't just craft for the purposes of the video, because what kind of loser would do that? You'll see that it has a base damage stat and then it has a secondary damage stat too. This weapon says 459 to 723 damage, but it also has 405 to 505 arcane damage. But what does that mean? Are we doing, say, 600 physical damage and then another hit of, say, 450 arcane damage with every hit? Well, no. In fact, for the vast majority of purposes, it just doesn't matter what element is on your weapon. The only number you should worry about is the big damage per second number. The reason for that is that every rune for every skill also has a corresponding element. For example, my Haunt skill deals cold damage because of the rune I've got on it. That overrides the element of your weapon. In fact, arcane damage isn't even available for my class, which is a Witch Doctor. The element that you attack with also isn't a big deal while leveling, but it's something to bear in mind if you happen to find a piece of gear which boosts a particular element's damage. So we've been through most of the basics, and now here's just a few tips to bear in mind while you're leveling up. Firstly, artisans. You'll meet 3 helpful people over the course of the story who'll set up camp with you and help you out. They're all really useful, but while leveling up, the most important is the blacksmith. You'll meet him early in Act 1 and he can craft gear for you and melt down all the useless gear you'll find for crafting materials. He can also repair your gear if it breaks, and that'll happen if you die a lot. The blacksmith is worth a visit every time you're in town, and you should upgrade him whenever possible, if you have the gold. If you're low on gold while leveling, which is possible but not terribly likely, it might be a good idea just to sell some of your useless blue and yellow gear to a vendor. Those items can fetch a few thousand gold apiece, and that might be more useful than salvaging them. Low-level gems are also not particularly useful, and they can pad your wallet really nicely. Chaining kills together can give you a big bonus to experience. That's something that's easy to exploit in maps with lots and lots of weaker enemies, particularly in Act 1. You'll generally want to have at least one mobility skill while leveling, to allow you just to get around faster. If you find a pair of boots that boost your movement speed, they'll help you out a lot. In addition to salvaging your gear drops, visit the blacksmith often to see if he can craft you a new weapon, and remember to upgrade him to unlock high-level weapons. I really can't stress enough how important raw weapon damage is, and you'll be much better off getting a new weapon every 5 levels or so. A two-handed weapon is likely to be better than dual wielding. Thanks for watching this guide, I really hope it helped some of you out, and I'll see you later.